I'm stressed out, broken out, and I'm here to watch part 2 of this podcast we watched yesterday. Basically, if you missed it, go and check out part 1. But we are covering Virginia Soul-Smith, the infamous fat activist who's basically saying everything is a DIET. Okay, and I'm spelling that word out because YouTube apparently doesn't like it. Okay, and it's assuming that I'm talking about the IT culture and whatever, right? What we learned last time was this woman is saying that basically DIET culture and weight are all things that society is using to put down women and is based in racism and all these other absurd things. But we're going to watch the rest of it. And yeah, as always, debunk it with me down in the comments. Let's just get into it. I am tired. I'm always tired. Every time you see me, I'm tired. That's because I'm trying to do 40 days of videos, guys. It's my reverse Lent, okay? And we are going to pick up where we left off. Look at these women. Why do they all look like they're about to start crying? Well, these two do. This one looks like, yes, my pretties, I'm making you cry.
Because another point that you make that, again, was a revelation to me is that thinness and health are completely equated by our doctors, our society. And I had a friend who had a terrible disease, and we lived in LA at the time. And she said everywhere she went, people were like, what are you doing? You look amazing. She's like, I'm dying, actually.
Yeah,
and she did
great.
not die, thank God. But like,
can we all just like agree for a second that's an outlier situation? We all know the whole Chadwick Boseman thing that happened where people were like, geez, he's losing so much weight. He looked unhealthily skinny, right? And turned out he had cancer and he passed away, and it was very, very sad. Now, obviously, this is a very awkward situation, what she's describing, but let's ask ourselves, is this the norm? There's always this weird thing about needing to make exceptions for people who are the outliers. And yeah, we should be as accommodating as we can, but acting like somehow society is at fault or society is defunct because we are accidentally applying norms to people where the norms don't apply. It's like, sorry, it happens.
The big trick is like, get this horrible disease, and you too could be 25 pounds underweight. But that I find with kids, I have a kid who struggles in an area, but because it manifests as thinness, it's not taken seriously in a way that friends of mine who have perfectly healthy kids who are fatter are told, well, they need to lose weight. It's like,
I don't believe that for a second. Okay. I don't believe the two things she said for a second. The first one, I was like, I'm going to let that slide. When she said the second thing, I'm like, no, she's just outright lying. Okay. Let's be clear. It's not 1997. It's not 2001. People aren't going to say, oh, you look amazing, unless you just happen to have that kind of frame. Okay. So I think she's extremely exaggerating on about an outlier subject. I don't think that's very honest at all. The other thing I want to call out is she's saying, I can't talk about it because her child had a thing with what she just mentioned with THINNESS. Okay, we're spelling it out so we don't get in trouble with YouTube. And he's not taking it seriously as someone who's like an average weight or a slightly above weight. That is crazy. And we all know that's untrue. Okay. It's exactly the opposite. That's the problem. Okay. People who are underweight are taken significantly more seriously because we can recognize that in a first world country as being a problem. It shouldn't be happening. Versus the other side of the spectrum is the one that has all this activism. Okay. So which one tells you is the one being taken seriously? I mean, people are definitely taken more seriously if you're underweight. Like, it's just beyond absurd that they would even present this like it were true. We all know they're lying, okay? And when they're talking about people who are overweight, if you're talking about somebody who's fat and they're like slightly overweight, yeah, you might get a doctor say, technically I'm on a BMI and I have to tell you because this is the guidelines, right? They just have to be upfront and honest with you. But they're not applying this logic to people who are around the average range. They're applying this logic to people who are hundreds of pounds overweight. Like this woman, I read in one of the articles that she identifies as like small fat. I'm sorry. That's above overweight. That's not a normal weight. I don't say that to be mean. I say that to be realistic. And the idea that people are looking at you and telling you that you need to lose weight because of your size is it anywhere the same as somebody who is significantly underweight and telling them to gain weight, because it automatically becomes a significantly more alarming medical concern. And hopefully I don't get, demonetized for saying that. Jeez.
That kid is much more healthy than a kid presenting in a thin body. And so where does our control piece come into that? Is it in understanding this and just synthesizing it for ourselves? Is it making it visible for medical providers? Where do we have some agency?
That's a great question, because it can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so powerless against this whole system. And exactly as you say, starting to untangle the relationship between thinness and health can feel really tricky for folks. One example I'll just throw out quickly is a story from the book of two sisters, one of whom was extremely ill. Her family couldn't figure out what was going on. She was frequently hospitalized, there was they were on this sort of year-long odyssey trying to understand her symptoms. And in the process of that, she was losing significant amounts of weight. And everywhere they went, she was praised for it. People, oh my gosh, she's so cute. Look how cute she is in these clothes. She's such a pretty little girl. And her younger sister, who was in a bigger body with absolutely no health problems whatsoever, the pediatrician was like, we really have to look at, we really need to consider doing something about this. Turned out the older sister had type 1 diabetes. She was extremely ill. And the younger sister, perfectly healthy, but her body was the one everyone worried about. So
let's just listen to what she said there. They went on a year-long odyssey in and out of hospitals, seeking medical help. And everybody was saying she was the one who didn't have problems. Well, clearly she did, because they were looking for the problem and they found it. It's weird how she contradicts herself in her own sentences, right? But because somebody, brought up the health realities of the larger sister that are more easily seen, that's the one that you focus on. That's so dumb, okay? I'm sorry, that is so dumb. She literally said they went on a year-long odyssey trying to figure out what was wrong with the girl. So somebody figured something had to be wrong. And it's one of those things where I went through the process of looking for an autoimmune disease back before I got diagnosed with my genetic disease. And you have to be referred to specialist after specialist after specialist as they try to narrow down what could be wrong with you. So yeah, sometimes it does take a year to get diagnosed with something. I think when I first started really hardcore looking for what could be wrong with me, I think it took about 3 years of searching. Take in mind, it was 15 years overall, but it was 3 years of narrowing it down and going to specialists. So no, a year does not sound like a long time for me to find out somebody has an autoimmune disease, which is type 1 diabetes. But they're going to use it as an excuse to be but society hates the fat sister. And it's no. Clearly it wasn't, because the other sister ended up being helped. And I'm sorry that everybody was saying that she was cute and fat. I also just one of the things where I just don't believe it. I think there's probably a handful of people who didn't know what they were talking about, and you're making it out to be it was everybody and their mother.
Just one example of the many, many ways in which weight and health usually have nothing to do with each other. Or even when weight does influence health, it might be weight loss, not necessarily weight gain. And focusing on the weight will not fix the underlying health problem. So we just approach it in this really narrow-minded way where all we do is think about the scale. So as parents...
Well, yeah, obviously, if you gain weight, it's not going to fix your type 1 diabetes. But in the case of the older sister, losing weight, yeah, probably would have fixed any issue she was having.
I think one of the most powerful things you can do is look for ways to remove weight as a problem, any discussion of weight as a problem, from your family's vocabulary. So that would include, and this one is a big one and hard for a lot of people, but if you have a scale in your house, can you get rid of that scale? Can you at least put it in a closet where it is not sort of the first thing your kids see when they go in the bathroom in the morning?
Okay, look at the faces on these women here. This is a fake smile. I'm sorry. This is the smile of somebody saying, I don't want to get rid of my scale. Okay, because they're going to sympathize with what she's saying. They're going to play the virtue signal and agree with what she's saying. But they're also thinking, but how can I monitor my body? I would not doubt it if maybe not these women, but women like them. Okay, don't come for me, litigation, are basically going through this to alleviate themselves of guilt of how much they actually do focus on their bodies.
And is stepping on it the first thing you do in the morning? And is that something you can step away from? And then it'll also be things like having a conversation with your pediatrician and saying, I don't want to talk about weight in front of the kids. Happy for you. There are times where we have to know, is my kid big enough for the booster seat or the car seat? There's times where you need to know your children's weight in terms of dosing medication, or, a few times a year, or, every few years, it's useful to have those touch points. But can we not discuss it in front of the kids? And if you have concerns, can you pull me aside and we'll have a sidebar conversation out of the exam room, just so that the kids don't have to hear a pediatrician saying their body is a problem. Because
as much as I dislike this woman, I actually do think that's a good idea. I don't think you should give the kids any kind of complex when they're younger. I really think that you should be kind of mindful about what a doctor is saying in front of them. And here's the thing about doctors. They don't get any classes in bedside manner. A bunch of people who are really type A, high achievement oriented, they often don't give a crap about you in a field where they should. Right? And we could all acknowledge that. So yeah, if you need to talk about your kids' health concerns, basically any health concerns, I don't think the kids should be present. Put some headphones on them, and sit them in front of like, I don't know, a play table or something. And then you as a doctor talk to the parent about what your kid's needs are. And it's funny that I say that because in speech pathology school, we were actually graded on bedside manner.
I can tell you from interviewing dozens and dozens of families, that's one of the most common disorder origin stories is the pediatrician making a negative comment.
I'm going to gloss over this as easily as I can, but negative comments do not cause behavior, and insisting that it does, I think goes against common sense. I think Alex is right that it's one part genetic and one part trauma, and you need to have both co-occur in order for it to happen.
And I just want to also say, it's not that your goal is to make sure your kids are never exposed to this stuff, because that's impossible, right? We live in this world, but it's to look for ways to turn down the volume, and also to be thinking about how you can engage with your kids on these issues so they can start to develop the skills they need to navigate this.
Virginia, I wanted to
That was weird.
ask you to talk a little bit about correlation and causation, because if you haven't been introduced to this topic before, like Margaret was saying in the first segment, you might be like, but being fat is unhealthy. And you really drill down on the studies in this book that show that there is maybe correlation, but there's not causation, which is what we had been led to believe. Can you explain the difference?
Yeah. So causation is when you can say very definitively that this behavior or this action, this trait causes this health condition. And the way science works, we can almost never say this, right? Like there's very few health conditions where we can say like, this is the cause of this. So what we have is...
Let's break this down for a second for people who aren't used to reading research articles or people who have never taken a research class. I had to go through all this when I was in grad school. When she says science, it's basically hard for science to do this. It's because of the way that studies are designed. Studies are designed like where the best studies will have a double blind, meaning the best way you can even do it is with something like a pill, because you get to give somebody a placebo and somebody a pill, and people can't know, who is taking what. And that's a very basic way of putting it. It's trying to just like show you that, I'm gonna make this a little bigger. I'm trying to show you that studies are really, really specifically designed that way. And so, yeah, it's very difficult to show causation in a double-blind study with people where you can't really control how they're eating, what medication they're taking, how they're living their lifestyles. Okay. You can say, please do this, but you can't put people into like a hamster cage and make them run on a wheel. Right. Do you get what I'm saying? And I feel like when she's talking about whatever research she's using her book, I don't even have read her book. I mean, I don't feel like I need to, because I'm hearing what she's saying and I can see how she's skirting around how things actually work, relying on your ignorance so that you don't actually challenge her on any of this. But yeah, so what basically every single study that you're going to have on weight is going to be a correlation type situation, simply because of the reasons I stated. You can't put people into a cage and force them to do things. That being said, we have enough observational research, we have enough behavioral research to show that, hey, when people tend to do this, this happens. We can't put it in a double-blind study to make it solid evidence, because there's things such as human rights, and there's laws about what we can and can't test. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a significant amount of evidence that shows that, yeah, that correlation is most likely a causation. Okay. We can see the effects with our own eyes. Okay. We don't really need even research in science. We can see with our own eyes people dying in their late 20s because they're weighing 600 pounds.
Decades of research showing a correlation where folks in larger bodies are more likely to have certain what we consider weight-linked health conditions, diabetes, heart disease, etc. But that doesn't mean that the higher body weight is the reason they have those health conditions. It's not necessarily the root cause. So it could be that the weight is simply another thing that's happening, right? Like this population tends to be in bigger bodies and they also tend to have this health condition, but the two things are totally unrelated. It could also be that there's some shared root cause that's contributing to a larger body weight and the health condition. We think this might be going on in something like PCOS, maybe, where you see body size go up sometimes and you see the PCOS, but it's not that the body size itself is causing it. It's that there's some underlying hormonal things going on that are driving both pathways. There's a couple different ways this can play out, but in every scenario, lowering body weight will not solve the health issue, because body weight is not the cause of the health issue. So that's what's important to understand is what.
But let's think about that for a second. The reason why a lot of times body weight does not solve the health issue is because the body weight is causing HARM to the body, right? Once that HARM is caused, it's a done deal, right? It's very, very difficult. You can't come back from heart disease, okay? Once your heart is damaged, it doesn't heal. And when it comes to things like diabetes, once you destroy those nerves really can't come back. I mean, if you lose your foot from diabetes, chances are your foot's not going to grow back, right? And losing weight's not going to make it grow back. You see what I'm saying? Now, as for PCOS, evidence does show that lowering your body fat does help alleviate the symptoms of PCOS. In fact, I mean, I'm not a big keto person, but if you're having severe PCOS, and it has been shown that going on a keto like can help alleviate the symptoms of PCOS and actually restart ovulation and things like that, because you're lowering your insulin levels through a ketogenic, and often insulin and PCOS are interlinked. So saying that it doesn't change it, it's like, yes, in some cases because the damage is done, but in other cases, it actually can help. So that's also very disingenuous what she's saying there.
What we have done as a culture in our entire medical system is anytime there's a weight-linked health condition, the doctor says lose weight and your health will improve. And what's probably happening when they see some of those benefits is that people changed lifestyle habits. Like maybe they started exercising more, which we know does have a causal relationship with improving lots of health outcomes. But you can get the benefits, those health benefits of lowering your blood pressure, your cholesterol, et cetera, by exercising, even if you don't lose weight. So if we were only to say it was successful if you lost weight, you might stop exercising, right? Because you'd be like, well, I didn't lose weight, because most people won't lose weight exercising. And so it's not worth doing. But actually, you're missing out on the true health benefits of that lifestyle change because you're making it all about weight.
So there is some truth to what she said there. Definitely exercising does improve your overall health. Any kind of movement does. I don't want to pretend for a second that this applies to anybody who's super morbidly obese. Yes, you might be very active like I was, a super morbidly obese person, but let me tell you, it's significantly easier 80 plus pounds down, okay? And I'm gonna be soon out of super morbidly obese, okay? It's gonna happen in about, I don't know. All I know is I went down a pant size again, not like a 3X to a 2X, but I went down within the 3X, and I'm like basically, I'm like at a 20, a size 20, and I'm like between 22 and 20, right? And I'm sometimes at a 20, and I'm sometimes at a 22. And I just got to get past that little push and to get the 20, and then I'm finally 2X. Ugh, I know, it's been a long time. But yeah, I can tell you for sure, it is significantly easier to walk a whole freaking mile at this weight than it was, like 80, 90 pounds ago. And pretending otherwise is I mean, I keep saying this, but it's absurd. But yes, improving exercise can help lower your insulin. Even if you don't lose weight, it can improve like your blood pressure. I think it can actually improve your cholesterol somewhat as well, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes along with that. At the end of the day, though, you can't exercise yourself out of an early grave because you weigh 500 pounds or even 347 like I used to weigh.
So this is where it's really about understanding that these body size is one trait. It's one thing going on with us, but it is not the whole story. And when we keep focusing there, we're actually underserving our health because we're missing the whole larger constellation of issues that we're likely dealing with.
Yeah, I want, we've talked about this before on the podcast, but like I want to put the chip in people's heads and be like, really, guys, we're not joking. This is actually true.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, the other piece of this is there's lots of research showing that there are times that higher body weight is good for your health. And we don't hear about that enough. I mean, in the research, they call it the obesity paradox, which right there, you see the stigma.
Okay, let's talk about the obesity paradox for a second. Having a BMI of like 30 which is what obese is, it's like 30 to 35 or something like that, is significantly different than having a BMI of like 45. For a lot of people, that could be anywhere between like 70 and 100 pounds. Maybe taller men will be like a little bit less. But what I'm trying to say here is, if you're a BMI of 30 and having an excess body fat of like, say, going through like chemo and radiation like my friend is, yeah, that can be helpful because you're losing weight while you're going through that, or you're going through some kind of heart issue and you get extra fat on you in order to go through it. But those studies do not at all apply to people who are in obese categories 2 and 3. Okay, if you have health issues in those categories, these research studies do not apply. They're not differentiating it because they want to get rid of the word obese. They're calling it a slur. They said it was bigoted, all these different things, when there actually are huge distinctions between those categories and the health effects that follow.
Embedded, right? Because it's like they're calling it a paradox because they can't imagine
a paradox because one of the things is bad.
Right. But what we see is that being in a larger body, you're less likely to get osteoporosis. People in larger bodies do better after heart surgery. They do better with cancer treatment.
Okay, you know why people in larger bodies, fat people, as like myself, are less likely to get osteoporosis? It's because the excess weight is pressing on the bones and it's causing the bones to strengthen. Okay, I know it seems crazy, but but you can get those same effects if you're like powerlifting. Now, what being in a large body does do is make you more prone to like regular arthritis, okay, like of your joints, because the excess weight is also pushing on those joints and breaking down the cartilage. I know, it's almost like these things are explainable. What was the other one she said? Oh, yeah. Heart surgery. Yeah, having a little bit of excess weight can help you because of that recovery period. It does not apply to obesity class 2 and 3.
There's a couple different things like that that are really powerful and life-sustaining health benefits, not just like a little mild change, like a major change. And again, this is a correlation, right? So it could be that the body weight has nothing to do with these benefits, or it could be that weight is sometimes truly protective. Either way, putting people on is not going to do anything to promote health in those scenarios. So
and realistically is not going to change anyone's weight. That's the other thing that I think is pretty radical. And we did an episode a long time ago called Let's Not Care What We Weigh. And like, can we just get to a point in our lives where this is no longer a factor? This is a number we no longer think about.
Yeah.
And I think it's been a journey, but I know for myself that it's something that I'm just like, I cannot. The amount of hours that I have spent thinking about my weight, if only I could have them back. And
yeah, right.
Okay, what she said does not surprise me at all. What did I say earlier in this episode, right? I knew I just had a feeling by the emotional looks on their faces. But I just also want to take a second to once again refute the obvious that people cannot sustain weight loss. Okay, all you have to do is look at Alex. He's lost like what, over 130 pounds now. I think close to 140, maybe more. I don't know how much I've lost. I just know that I've lost at least more than 85 pounds. Okay, I've lost more than 85 pounds. We'll see how much I've lost. I don't know when I weigh myself next month. I'm hoping I'm at least over 90 pounds lost. Okay, I hope I'm inching towards 100. We'll just have to see. I might be 100 pounds lost closer to my birthday, which is at the end of May, but it's just because of the very slow way I'm losing weight. But hey, it's happening, right? And I know it's happening because I'm literally going down in clothing sizes and I haven't gained any of it back. Right. And it's been this summer, like in June, it'll be 3 years since I started losing weight. Yeah, it's only about an average of like what, 30-ish, 35 pounds a year. Hey, it's 35 more pounds than before I started losing weight, right? Somehow I managed to sustain it. If I sustain it for 2 more years, guys, guess what? Guess what? I win. I win the lottery of fat people who lost weight. Hopefully, though, within 2 years, I've lost it all. You'll see me like super skinny face on this channel. I mean, just go back and look at my earlier videos, okay? Look how big my face was. I'm a little bloated right now, so like it's a little puffy right here on the jaws, whatever, but it's significantly still thinner than it used to be.
I have kids, and now obviously like I want to break some of the patterns that I have been exposed to. And so let's talk a little bit about how anti-fat bias shows up in our kids and in our lives. And I think many of them are fairly obvious. You know, we were definitely raised with good foods and bad foods, and
good eaters and bad eaters.
Yeah.
Good eaters and bad eaters. And as you said, one of the things that I've become conscious of in my middle age is that I try not to make appearance part of any greeting that I have with another human being. Like I try not to start conversations with like, you look great, because translation in my life has always been, as my weight has fluctuated throughout my life, you look great it's someone just saying to my face, you finally look thinner.
Right.
And so
I think it's very obvious that people who think that way have an issue. Do you get where I'm going? We're not going to talk about it, but do you get where I'm going? This is just allegedly. I don't know for sure. I've been significantly fatter than her, and my brain doesn't think that way. Maybe it did on occasion, but I was not obsessed with it like that. Yikes.
You know, I know there are certain things about not talking about food as having moral values and trying not to greet people and talking about weight. But What are some other ways that anti-fat bias is creeping into our language and our interactions with our kids?
I think the family dinner table is a great place to start. I mean, you mentioned the good foods and bad foods thing, but it's also stuff like, if one of the parents is dieting and not eating certain foods, kids pick up on that. Even if you're not telling the kids they can't eat carbs, they know if mom or dad isn't eating carbs. And that is something they really notice. It also, in terms of our kids' lives, it shows up in school. Unfortunately, most of our health and nutrition programming in schools is based around an obesity prevention model. So kids are going to start learning very early. I just got a note from a parent today saying, my daughter's in high school and she got a calorie counting assignment in health class. This is really common, that they give kids calorie logs and tell them to track everything they eat for 2 weeks and count. Like, this is literally teaching children behavior.
Okay, I cut out that word there. Calorie counting is not that behavior. Okay, calorie counting is seeing, oh, this is actually how much I'm consuming. That's the end of it. Okay, honestly, that is a massive overreaction. And also, I want to go back to what she said about the dinner table for a second. Okay, if a parent is actually so concerned about what they're eating, I can almost guarantee you they are talking about it out loud in front of their kids. Okay, they might be like, oh, I've never talked to my kids about this, but they just picked up on it. Lie. Lie. Yes, kids can pick up on things, but if the kid asks mom, hey mom, why aren't you having a bun with your hamburgers? You don't actually have to tell them. You just be like, oh, well, I'm just not that hungry today. Or like, I like my hamburger better this way. You can say things like that. Who cares, right? Big deal. But I've never been in a situation where a parent was DIETing and they weren't just obsessively talking about it. So no, like if you think that's the case, you're in significant denial.
And
Yeah.
like 40-year-old behavior, right?
Right.
Counting calories
Exactly.
is the way
Like,
to be thin.
counting calories is not necessary for anybody's health. And to give this to middle schoolers and high schoolers who are like the most at risk group, it just blows my mind.
And
So that's
I'm a fan of pushback behavior. Like, we talk about homework for first graders. I would just send it back and be like, no, thanks. We don't need to be doing an hour of homework. My kids are outside playing. Thanks.
Yeah.
Calorie counter goes back in our household and says, no, thanks. We
Oh,
don't
yeah.
do this kind of behavior. And also the doctor who told me that one of my problems would be solved by losing 25 pounds. I was like, no, thanks.
No, thanks.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I've been working on it for 35 years now. Spoiler alert.
I can tell you it's not happening. Yeah.
So what's the other option? Like, I think that's another piece of control, is being able to say, like, we're not going to participate in this.
Yeah, no, it's definitely with the assignments. I encourage parents to opt out of the BMI screenings. If your school does those, like weighing kids in gym class is a barbaric practice that we need to be done with.
Is that still happening?
In at least 26 states, yes.
No.
Yeah. So that's when, like, if you have to keep your kids home that day, do it. But the other
Totally
piece
fine.
of it I want to emphasize is we should recognize it is easier for some of us to push back and opt out than others.
Absolutely. That's such a good point.
If you are someone who's in a straight size body, meaning you don't wear plus size clothes, even if you have your own personal struggles with weight, which again, we're all in this culture, we all have it. It is easier for you to say to a doctor, I'm not going to get on the scale, or to say to the gym teacher, my daughter's not going to complete that assignment, because you are not being judged in the way that a fat person is being judged. So what I would encourage folks with straight size privilege to do is not only do that pushing back, but also think about what can you be doing in your community to make sure it is more size inclusive all across the board.
Okay, guys, we are going to end it there for part 2. I was never weighed in a gym, and I went to school in several different states. I've never seen that. I mean, if you did, tell me down below, okay? I think if they were weighing you at all, probably it was always during like the nurses like time, and that's in like in a private room. So I have no idea about that. But yeah, let me know if you lived in a state that actually weighed you. I mean, I don't think it's necessary to be weighed at school like that. I think a lot of what they're saying is extremely hyperbolic. I don't think it's based in reality at all. And I think they're bringing their own personal issues and emotions into this. Like, I think it's funny because Alex said, I'm just keep bringing Alex up again all the time because I just watch his videos and I think it's so interesting and he's my friend. But it's something about Gen X women, like these two on the right, right? Gen X women are like super obsessed with this. Like something went on with them, right? And here comes along millennial women, such as myself, but we're talking about this one right here, are here to confirm and alleviate your guilt. I apologize for having to cut out so much of like the sound and that. I just don't want to be flagged by YouTube. They really do not like talk about that kind of stuff. But anyways, let me know what you think down in the comments, and I will catch up with you guys later. I'm gonna go film the third part of this, and wish me luck. I am exhausted with these people. As I'm sure you guys are too. But wow, we are learning so much, aren't we? Right? We are learning that people are so delusional, living in their own reality, and they can't help but try and force that on everybody else. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.